Favorite Everyday Inclusion Live that we do all year long because we are releasing our trends report, and I am talking to brilliant women about the results. I'm Mo. I'm the founder of the Moxie Exchange and Everyday Inclusion app, and that's the data that we're going to be talking about today. I'm a white woman. I'm wearing some frames, got on a green jacket. My bookshelf is behind me. I am joined by three amazing panelists. Samia Mathur actually did all of the data analysis for us. And she has spent her career, she's been a global citizen, living around the world, and is an advisor in the DEI space. Steph Douglas has spent her career unleashing human potential. She is currently the Chief People Officer at Quizlet. She serves on a lot of boards. She's a marathon runner and all around badass. I can say that, it's my show. And Daisy and I have been, it's been great because Daisy and I have been like this for years, and I'm so thrilled to have her. Daisy is a board member, same thing as Steph has spent her career around how to create workplaces where every single person can thrive. I'm super excited. I'm holding up Daisy's book. Her book, Inclusion Revolution, the second edition, y'all, is coming out. I think it's March 19th. You can pre-order now. And she has a second book coming out, From Burnt Out to Lit Up. And that will be out this fall, sometime in September. So let me, before we dive into hearing from these incredible panelists, I just want to share how the report itself came to be, where this data comes from. So Everyday Inclusion collects anonymous aggregate data. So companies use this to put the business of belonging in their employees' hands. So folks are not, it's really self-directed use. So people are using the tool. We say it's kind of like DEI in the wild. Nobody is telling them what to look at or what to search for or what to favorite. So this is user data we're going to be talking about. It's not research. There were I think there were 39 companies. And all of this is in the report, which I know we're putting a link so y'all can download and look at the details. I think the exciting thing about this is, again, self-directed choice-based use. And so the trends that we're going to be talking about today are really how are people using a resource related to inclusion of their own free will. And this whole thing, I would say, people want to be good coworkers. That is kind of it. So, Daisy, I'd like you to. So the three findings, so the three findings. Let me go back. We're having weird stuff happening. Of course, technology. Three findings were this. So culture creators were the key users. And what do we mean by culture creators? They're the bottom of the pyramid. Those individual contributors, team leaders, and managers make up 73% of users. And I think that is surprising to folks for a couple of reasons. The second is that disability inclusion tops the list for searches. So more than a third of topics that people were searching for were somehow disability related. And then the third key finding is that words really continue to make up our worlds. People want to know what to say and how to say it. So really, really practical content that people are searching for, favoriting, and looking at. Daisy, I'd love to get your take on that first finding that I think is probably a pretty big aha for folks, that those culture creators, the people at the bottom of the pyramid, are the primary users. And I think what I find interesting about this is there's usually an inverse relationship on where organizations are spending their dollars and their resources, and really spending that on director level and above. But the folks that are using this it's opposite that. So what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Mo, for having me. And everyone, I'm Daisy OJ Dominguez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am speaking to you today from my home office in the Republic of Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, and I am surrounded by books behind me, and a little bit of leftover snow from the snowstorm 2 days ago. Mo, I'm not surprised by these findings. The people, right, that answered this question, they're the lifeblood of organizations, and we tend to, as you noted, focus so heavily on the top levers of an organization, and we forget where the sore spots are, right? The people who truly feel what is happening, where failures exist, where secrets exist, where tensions exist, are usually in those bottom rungs up to the mid level. But I'm going to focus on managers because I think they just don't get enough love. And your research, so much research out there points that out. And managers are in the trenches, right? They are day in and day out, with the most direct influence on how their teams, right? Those folks in the middle and below experience the workplace, right? How they produce, how they perform. When it comes to transforming organizations, the spotlight has to shine on managers, and they can either play a part in creating what I call burnout inducing work environments, or nurturing spaces where employees thrive and find fulfillment and joy in their roles and truly engage in their day to day, which is, I think, with the work that you're trying to, and that drive for motivation, for commitment, the perception of leadership, all of these elements that we spend so much time talking about resides in these spaces in organization, and that high wire act that managers have to play every day when they're juggling decisions about schedules and tasks and demands and unforeseen circumstances and commitments and the humans, right? The humans that are again, the heartbeat and the center of every organization. These are the people who are speaking, and they're the folks that we don't always listen to. They're the folks that we don't always design for in organizations, and they're the folks that it may feel like an impossible job, but it's a necessary job of leaders to ensure that we're hearing their voices.
I love the way that you said that the heartbeat of an organization, because that we really, right, thinking about it that way. And I want to just jump in here really quickly. We've had some folks saying that the LinkedIn Live event, for some reason, has not started. I put in the event, if you go to my feed on LinkedIn, which is Maureen Berkner-Boyd, and I put that in the event comments. We are streaming live there. So technology doing its thing. Steph and Samya, I'm curious if you have anything to add to what Daisy did around this kind of being the heartbeat of an under-resourced folks being heavy users. And Daisy, I agree with you. It was not a surprise to me that these were the primary users. Steph, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it makes sense to me. It's things are coming at you from all directions at that level, right? There's the people that you're supposed to be bringing up and mentoring and supporting, whether they're peers or reports. And then there's everyone above you that's leaning on you to do that good work. So I'm not at all surprised that these are our heavy users. I think there's a great burden on that population.
Yeah, I mean, I often think about this, that these are the folks that, they're newest in role, and they have so much pressure, right? Because we know that people leave managers, not companies. And really what they're leaving is the culture that those managers are creating. So again, these folks are yearning for resources. I want to go and chat a bit about our second finding, which is about disability inclusion. So you download the report, you'll see that folks are, they're looking at things like autism, and is it deaf or hard of hearing, right? Just really, really practical things around disability. And again, that makes up over a third of the searches that had happened. And Samia, I know that as you were looking at the data and analyzing the data, you and I had some conversations that was kind of a wow moment. So what do you think is behind that?
Yeah, Mo, I think I would say I have like a mixed bag of feelings about this. One is really finally, we need to talk about this. This is so rampant in our society. Where in America alone, CDC data shows that 1 in 4 Americans are living with disability, and it translates to about 60 million people. The most dominant categories of this is people who are not able to move, like arthritis or cognitive neurodivergence. Ultimately, I'm also a little bit surprised because DEI over the last few years, or the last decades even, has been so heavily focused on gender and ethnicity. So it's really interesting to kind of take account of these waves of change and this enhanced focus on disability inclusion. One of my favorite writers on this topic is Kevin Kling, and he suggests that if you're able-bodied, it's only a temporary condition.
Yes.
So this world just needs to take better account, for those who are living with disability, and never confuse it as inability, but rather accept this simply as a different way of doing things. And we haven't acknowledged it for so long. And what that's done is that it has created pockets of systemic failure. For example, when we study, the incidence of disability, it's highest in American Indians and Alaskan Natives, both minorities. When we look at, the impact on people who are living with disability, we see that these groups, they face more psychological stress, especially in events during COVID. This group earns significantly less than the median in the country, so 28,000 versus 40,000 USD. And when we look to the future, we see that 15% of enrolled students in schools today are living with disability. So when this group gets ready to join the workforce in about 10 years, how are we going to make the world more inclusive by then? The finding is, it's relieving, it's surprising, it's relevant, it's timely, but I think it ultimately begs the bigger question of what are we actually going to do about it?
Well, isn't that always the case?
Yeah.
And I appreciate you sharing those statistics. I think one of the things that is interesting too is we've definitely seen a rise in the disability pride movement. So for example, many of you know that my daughter is a part of this community. And I would say in the last 4 years, she switched from people first language to identity first language, and is very proud to be a member of the disability community. And I wonder if some of this isn't also having to do with coworkers now, at least at the team level, may be more willing to talk about their disability. And the folks that work with them may be more interested then in, now I just found out my coworker's autistic, or ADHD, or has a neurodivergence of some kind, right? All of those things. Now I want to know how to be a good coworker. So, Daisy, any thoughts on this finding, or some of the data that Samia shared?
Again, not terribly surprising, but I think her last question to us is, okay, now that you know, what are you going to do about it? And I think to your point about folks wanting to be good coworkers, right? Fundamentally, I've always, my teams always hear me say this. It's like we walk in presuming good intent, right? I learned this from a manager and boss I had many years ago, and I really do fundamentally believe that. But part of creating cultures of belonging and understanding, they require us to choose an approach that, and a role, if you will, that is going to help support yourself and your teams. And that requires a whole lot of reflection, right? And it requires, self-reflection, right? Taking a hard look in the mirror and, and understanding, what's the role that I've been playing and what role do I want to play in creating a better work environment and nurturing my teams and really truly understanding the multiplicity of identities that they walk into these hallways and virtual spaces with, but it's also organizational reflection, right? What are the internal factors that fuel engagement and or potentially burnout, and and that fuel that sense of belonging in folks, or exclusion, right? What does that look like? We have to take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. And then we need to also have, create a space for interpersonal reflection, right? What are the external factors that take a toll on the humans in the organization, right? That are impacting the organization? What is happening politically, socially, economically, that folks are carrying with them as well? And then the fourth step is really, okay, well, now that you've done all that reflection, and now that you've seen all these pieces, this is where the real courage and that real, sense of responsibility and effort towards being a good person at work is, okay, well, then let me test some interventions. Let me test some new ways of behaving and engaging with others that are promoting that sense of belonging and connection, that are not just grounded on my assumptions about what people need, but that are grounded on the real experiences and pain points of the folks around me. So I think that's the kind of work that, and it's work, right? But it's the kind of work that we can all take on to create cultures where belonging and and connectivity and engagement and shared understanding are experienced across the board.
I think that's so right. We always have to be thinking about intent versus impact, and just this constant curiosity. And I loved how you really walked us through, Daisy, different levels of that, right? The self-reflection, the team reflection, the interpersonal, and that it's never done. Steph, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I was actually excited to see that this is an area of focus where people are finally paying attention. I think that it's been slow to get as much traction as you would hope, especially when you start to hear those statistics. So I'm thrilled about it. I've actually noticed it becoming topic where you're seeing, right, the normalization, because things come into TV shows, right? So you see people in TV shows or reality TV with being differently abled. So I'm thrilled that we're seeing such an uptick in awareness, because awareness, I hope, will lead to action. So it's a first step.
So that actually brings, there's so much, people have heard me say this before on this series. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. One of the things that I love about social media is it can give you proximity to people. And so if you are, right, so you can see multi-dimensional life experiences that I think it's very, very cool. So if you don't have people in your world that because I guarantee you do have somebody in your world who's disabled, if they have not revealed that to you, the team, then what are you doing around psychological safety? Right, back to some of the things that Daisy was talking about. And the question that Samia posed to all of us is, what are we going to do about it? So much of this, particularly around disability, is about the psychological safety for people with those hidden or invisible disabilities, to feel that it's safe for them to reveal that, because they won't be marginalized, they won't be minimized. So I would say, you might start your education process through everyday inclusion, through following some people on social, right, and lean into that. And if you yourself are in any position of authority or leadership and you have a disability, share that. Because then you're going to create, because I know quite a few leaders who hide things. Okay, so third finding, for the third year in a row. So we started tracking and releasing this trends report 3 years ago. For the third year in a row, people want to know what to say and how to say it, right? They are very, very heavy on search, on favorites, on screen views, on that content. Like, what the heck is a gender neutral pronoun? Is it deaf, hard of hearing? Is it, right, just these really, really practical things about language? Because again, the overarching headline of this is people want to be good coworkers. Samia, Um, uh, I'm sorry, Steph, pulling out the wrong panelist here. What do you make of this? And I'm particularly interested in you pulling on all your years of people leadership and HR and those people teams. Um, was this a surprise? What do you think? And how are you seeing this show up at Quizlet and other organizations that you've led?
Yeah, I'm thrilled to weigh in on this one. And I'm Stephanie Douglas, CPO of Quizlet, pronouns she, her, and I'm in my office surrounded by books and my grandmother's art, just to get people oriented to where I am. So here's what I think. I think mostly people want to do the right thing. They want to say the right thing, and they don't always know how to do that. It can be very scary for people if they're unsure how to use certain terms, especially if it's feeling new to them and it's feeling awkward to them. And I generally believe people don't want to offend people. There's this fear. I think, I talked to you about this, Maureen. I think things come out of mostly two places, fear and love. And I think that this is both of those things, love for people and not wanting to offend, and fear of saying something wrong, doing something wrong, offending people, embarrassing yourself. So, I think that the search makes sense, right? If you don't know what to say, or if you're scared to say something, it's going to stop you from engaging. And that's not good. It creates these silos and it increases barriers to inclusion and belonging. So big stuff. And so you've got the resource to actually find things, to get a little comfortable in what is a safe space for you. And I wish the whole world was a safe space, but it's not always. It gives people the chance to figure things out before they come to the table. And we hope that limits the hesitation to engage. And for some people, it is easier to do that when they self-educate. I'll give you an example that is a little different. If you don't know how to pronounce a team member's name, maybe you just keep calling on Jennifer in all those meetings, right? And this is creating silos, and it's creating conflict, and it's creating otherness. So anything we can do to learn on our own, if we're not comfortable doing it in a more public space, is not a bad thing. Ideally, again, I'd like us to be creating spaces where it's okay to fumble and recover. So we know people now are looking at words and terms. That's a good sign. The other thing that I really liked about seeing that is it's showing not only that they want to engage, very important, they want to do it the right way, very important. It also means they're putting the burden on themselves to educate. And it's been a hot topic lately in the last few years, is there are groups of people who may be marginalized. They're also having the burden of educating other people who might be marginalizing them. And that's a lot of burden. So when people are doing this self-work, I think this is good. It's saying, I will self-educate, I will do the work, and then I will try to come to the table in a good and right way. So I'm very happy to see that this is where people are spending time.
Well, and to that point, right, when we know now that Millennial and Z make up the bulk of the workforce, and then when we think about who the users are, right, and sort of as, right, those folks are asking for more resources, they're using those resources, they're taking that self-accountability. Such a great point, right, in terms of, and there's so much of this always that goes back to psychological safety too, right, the ability to make those mistakes, but to have the information to say, hey, here's something I learned. Is that right? Is that the language that you use, right? Even just creating a bridge for those conversations. Soumya, any thoughts that you want to add around this whole language? Because I love, y'all, when you download the report, you're going to see Soumya just put in this part that just says a word, please, right? And then we go into the report. So Soumya, thoughts?
Yeah, actually, when we were looking through the data together, Mo, I think we're clearly living in a postmodern world, right? Change is just status quo. It's every day. Advent of social media, like you said, it's constantly reminding us on a daily basis something that's always been true, and that there is an inextricable link between power and language. So, the words that we use, they are transforming, they're shaping reality. You compare a kid who gets constant encouragement and approval from someone who gets constantly criticized, right? You see the power of words right there. And so I think recently, due to the wars and the pandemic too, we have all realized that our faiths are linked also. And so it's better to kind of build bridges rather than barriers. I think those are the kind of two things that always come to my mind when I think of, the evolution of language itself. Through my words now, more than ever, I want to communicate empathy. I want to increase my understanding of the things that I don't understand or experiences that I have not lived. And generationally too, like you said, Gen Z is on track to becoming the most diverse generation in all of history. 48% of the people are going to be people of color, so 1 in 2. 25% are, identifying as LGBTQIA+. So it's our responsibility to remove boxes and labels and to, really show this kind of cultural humility and wanting to learn. And this is all becoming critically important to even just live in this world, not even to survive in this world and thrive in this world. And language has essentially gone from centering to decentering. Earlier, when I was using language, it was to center myself and express my experiences, whereas now it's about decentering, putting someone else at the center and understanding not my intention, but rather my impact on others when I use language.
Yeah, I love that shift. I had somebody share with me. It was during the height of Me Too. White guy, friend of mine, cisgender, like all the things. And he was like, "Well, Mo, now I just feel like I have to think about everything that I say." And I laughed and I was like, "Isn't that great?" Like you're having to think about how your words impact the person that you're talking to. How wonderful. And like he got this look on his face. He thought about it and he was like, "Yeah, I guess so, right?" Like I'm thinking about my impact. So it's I'm not gonna share too much. We just finished with some survey that debunks a lot of what is being said around DEI and it being politicized. And at Moxie, we are still seeing this trend. And it really feels like, in the last page of the report, we talk about a look ahead and this divergence that we're seeing, where we're seeing organizations either double down or step back from the work that they've been doing around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility. And I think that the repercussions in the near future are going to be very real for both, and the impact is going to be very real for both those companies that are saying we're staying the course and those that are saying that we're pulling back. Looking forward in this politicized environment, in this kind of bifurcation that we're seeing happen, what piece of advice would you give leaders during this time? And Daisy, love for you to share your thoughts on that.
Well, Mo, you know that my first word of advice is always persist, right? This is not the first time nor the last that a movement, an initiative, an effort of this kind is going to face resistance. And so usually my cheeky but very real answer is like, we're going to persist, right? But to persist, that means that you have to get very clear on what you're trying to achieve. You have to understand what this means for you. You have to be clear on and concise with your teams, but starting with yourself, and you have to make sure that the messages that you're giving out externally, right, that there's not a chasm between what people think about your organization and how people experience your organization, right? That's not politicized, right? That's simply living by your values and your mission. But I think part of at the core of the challenge for the work of DEI is that we underestimate the challenge of making belonging, equity, and inclusion stick as a lasting and integral part of organization, not just of organizations, but of organizational culture. And we've also, in many cases, have failed to explain what's available on the other side to everyone involved, right? There's benefits and there's value in this for everyone in an organization and in society as a whole. And so that's that's the work that I see as, as happening next, right? The way to persist, the way to continue this work that is critical to organizational growth and vitality is by getting very clear on what this means for you and your organization, getting very clear on, on how it's embedded through what you do and how you do it, and helping people understand what's available on the other side. Why do we do this? Because this is a long journey, like most journeys. And when you and I have spoke about this, I mentioned to you that I had just recently spoken to some folks that I'm advising, and they were worried that the D&I function was going to be completely eradicated. And I reminded them from a simple organizational structure perspective, right? I've led global teams, and the senior executives managing these teams, and when the economy is waning, when things are changing and across markets, we don't take away entire marketing teams. We don't take away entire product teams, right? We streamline and we reduce what we need to, and we prepare for when there will be another flow, right? And another uptick in the economy. And so that's the work of DEI now, is understanding the conditions and the waters in which we're swimming right now, and getting prepared for when those waters shift, because they will.
Well, and I think there's something too, that is, so many organizations were new to this work starting in 2020. You have to do some experimenting too, in terms of what works. I love that you said you wouldn't throw out your whole marketing team, right? But you will look and say, you know what, that campaign didn't work for us. It wasn't resonating, so we're going to try a different campaign. It's the same with this work. What is sticky? What are you measuring? What is actually creating change and impact? And you're never going to get all of that right. You continue to change your tactics and your strategies based on the time, based on your organizational maturity, all of those things. It's not just, it's not working, we're done. Right? So I think there's that piece too. Samia, I know that you've seen this in a lot of different organizations, and you experienced an organization that threw in the towel on effort. So your thoughts on this, I'm very, very interested to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there are companies I feel like they're having a moment of reckoning, and whoever's reading the news in detail will know that flaky economy is not the only reason why these DEI initiatives are, like you said, throwing in the as a psychologist, I'm always kind of, always thinking about the fear of replacement theory. Most large organizations have what social psychologists would call a white, masculine, heterosexist, ableist culture. But sadly, the roles are finite, money is finite, resources are finite. And so to create a truly diverse leadership, it would mean relinquishing of power and position for a lot of current leaders. And so how would that come about, right? I mean, that's just a really kind of practical way of looking at what's happening currently. But it's not all bad, like you said, there are certain companies that are throwing in the towel, but then there are certain companies that are going in deeper and that are doubling down. And these are typically companies who have been doing this work long before 2020, and they will continue to do this long after it's no longer the flavor of the season. So these companies are truly playing the long game because they have to win in the long term. Your employees have to represent your customers. Companies with more diverse leadership are 36% more profitable. They are more innovative. They also have intangible benefits like greater engagement, belongingness, loyalty. So these companies are not just better, but they're also smarter because they are likely to outlast companies who are compromising the sort of creating long-term value for very short-term gains. And in all likelihood, they're possibly going to lose out on the top talent, on their critical job families, because people never forget how companies, managers, leaders, make them feel. So even from a personal standpoint, Mo, I stand by that, and I'm looking at companies that are playing this game way longer and not looking at some quick wins and winning just these short-term immediate battles.
It's interesting that I love the data that you brought up too, and playing the long game. We actually created an ROI calculator that's specific to an organization, because I think sometimes people hear these big numbers, like it's 1 trillion that would be added to the economy, and that doesn't feel real. But what does it feel like if you could, change your turnover by 1%? Right. And what is that dollars and cents? And so I think there's that piece of it. And Steph, I know that you have a lot of these conversations. What are you telling leaders right now, right, in your organization about this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such an exciting topic. So I would tell leaders in general, DEIB, it's not a trend. It's not your latest engagement tool, although it is an engagement tool. It's life. And if you want to, diverge from there, you're going to have a lot of catch up to do. But a lot of the leaders that I talk to, where I see perhaps people turning away a little bit, some people are doing it just for bad reasons. But I think that there are companies, smaller companies often with less resources, who have DEIB programs that are quite nascent and fragile and being handled by people who it's, not even their day job. So what I would say to those, because that's a very different category than the, big engines that are going that you can back off a little and still have a good program. To these, I would say, look at where you're struggling. So a lot of people slowed or stopped hiring in the last couple of years. And in a lot of nascent programs, that's where people start. Is in hiring practices. And so now they might be struggling. What do I do? Well, there's a world of beautiful things to do. And this is a chance for those small groups with small resources to look at what can I focus on. We slowed hiring last year. And so it gave us time to put a lot of work into the belonging piece of the programming. So there's always work to be done. It's always good work to be done. It will pay off. You're putting money in the bank, right? And it's building interest. And you may not feel it today or tomorrow, but long term, it's the right thing to do. So I have a special affinity for some of the smaller organizations that want to do this work and are struggling with, what do I do? What do I do with limited resources? What do I do if I can't focus on hiring? And what I would say to them is there's so much to do that might actually be even more interesting to look at right now.
I love that. Right. Again, it's sort of what's the strategy and what's the tactic for now, for where your organization is. So y'all, I always end this program with this question, and that is, I would like for each of you, and I'm going to go in order that I can see you, Samia, Steph, and Daisy, to leave me with one last truth bomb. Right? We've got this user data that is showing us that, right, culture creators, the bottom of the pyramid, are heavy users. You give them a resource, you give them a tool, they are using it. That disability is searched, liked, looked at, and that makes sense, right? 1 in 4. And that words and language and what to say and how to say it. So what is your last truth bomb about the future of employee experience and creating cultures of belonging? Samia, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Well, Mo, I think this year a winning strategy for organizations would be to focus on their candidate experience. When you're bringing in employees right now, there is such an influx of talent in the market because of large-scale layoffs and everything that's happening in tech. It has quickly become an employer's market, which means that employers, are kind of having a heyday. They can pick from a really large pool of candidates. They can underpay. They can get away with asking people to return to office. All of these things, all of these mandates are in full effect right now. And so I think people are for jobs more. So for this reason, we're seeing some of the lowest engagement that we have ever seen for new joiners. So when employees join a company, we call it a honeymoon period, where in that 0 to 6 months, they're most excited about a company. But right now, we have seen that completely go away this year. So the pendulum will swing back, right? And like Daisy said, and employees will remember this experience and how it made them feel. So if in this market, even if you have an upper hand, if you're a leader running an organization or running a talent acquisition function, don't lose sight of winning long-term and retaining people, making retention strategies a part of your selection strategy, and treating people fairly, what they deserve, what they would do, even if the market was in an upswing. So really focus on your candidate experience and bring in people with a lot of dignity and respect, and pay mind to their individual differences when you think about disability, when you think about their home situation, caregiving status, all of this. Definitely make them feel good about their candidate experience.
I love that. And I love the long game there, Samya.
Yeah.
Steph, what's your truth bomb for us?
Okay. And Soumya, I think that's amazing advice. And I 100% agree with everything you said. So my truth bomb is we are in an election year and they're always rough. This one's going to be particularly rough. And so I would say you need to keep an eye on your people, all your people. This is going to be a year that brings out the best in people and the worst in people. And we know that often that means promoting otherness and fear. And so I think this is a time where we're going to have a lot of people in pretty fragile state. And we need to keep an eye on what we can do in our environments to keep those safe spaces for people.
I love that, Steph. And we have, and I can't wait to track it. We have content in Everyday Inclusion that is around politics, not about taking a political stance, but about how do you not let that, right, the political engine that is trying to create otherness impact your inclusion and belonging at the team. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting. And, here we are. How is it an election year again? Daisy, leave us, bring us home with one last truth bomb.
Oh, goodness. Well, +1 to Soumya and Steph, absolutely, on the candidate experience and overall well-being of our employees. I would say, this like every year is the year to focus on the beautiful basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do as an organization well? What are the areas for improvement? And fundamentally, given the unending stream of crises and conflict and confusion that we're all facing, this is a year to continue to focus on wellness and shared understanding. This is not about building into an us versus them mindset, but about building a shared understanding and a reminder to your employees of why they work where they work and for what reasons.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The three of you are brilliant. I am so deeply appreciative of you coming on and really unpacking, right? Again, users in the wild. Make sure all of you that you are connected to the three of them, that you're following them, that you are pre-ordering the latest edition of Daisy's book. Go ahead, download the report if you want to reach out to me about the ROI calculator. I will say this, make sure in all of this that you are taking care of you. So we can't serve our employees and our teams if we ourselves are in a place of burnout. So make sure you're taking care of you and get there and do the next right thing. We're all going to make mistakes. We are all going to stumble. But again, we talk so much about the consistency and this being a long game that goes for us too. So take care of you, get out there, do the next right thing. Would love, love, love to hear any of y'all's thoughts on the report and any predictions that you might have for what we might see when we're having this conversation next year. Soumya, Daisy, Steph, thank you so much. Like, big love. And we will see you next time on Everyday Inclusion and Belonging. Cheers, y'all.